Hotspot with Loveth.
It was a cold November evening when the knock came. Daniel Grant was settling into his usual evening routine, nursing a glass of wine in his modest Lagos apartment. After a long day of work at the law firm, he relished these quiet moments, away from the bustle of the world and the demands of his high-profile cases. His phone was off, his laptop closed, and the only sound was the occasional hum of traffic outside his window. The knock echoed again, more urgent this time. Who could that be? Daniel muttered to himself, glancing at the clock. It was nearly 8 in the evening. He wasn't expecting anyone. His close friends knew he preferred solitude, and his family rarely stopped by without giving notice. With a sigh, he set his glass down and crossed the room to answer the door. Standing on the other side was a woman, drenched from the rain, her dark brown hair plastered to her face, her clothes soaked through. Her eyes were wide with fear, and her hands trembled as she held a suitcase tightly. "Please," she gasped, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need help." Daniel was taken aback by her appearance. She was obviously in distress, but something in her eyes, an almost desperate vulnerability, tugged at his heart. As a lawyer, Daniel had seen his fair share of troubled clients, but this was different. He was no hero, but the kindness in him won out. "Come inside," he said quickly, pulling her into the warmth of his apartment. The woman introduced herself as Eva Carter. She claimed she was fleeing from an abusive relationship, needing to escape a dangerous man who had a history of violence. Daniel, though skeptical at first, listened carefully as she explained how she had been living with her partner in a small flat on the other side of town. When things had taken a violent turn, she had taken what little she could carry and fled. "I don't know where to go," she had explained. "I don't have anyone else. I've been trying to survive, but it feels like I'm being hunted every day." Though part of Daniel doubted the truth of her story, there was something in the way she spoke, her obvious fear, the trembling hands, and the haunted look in her eyes that convinced him she was genuinely in need. He had made a quick decision. "You can stay here for now," Daniel said, moving aside to allow her into his apartment. "But you should report this to the police as soon as possible. No one should have to live like that." Eva nodded gratefully, though she seemed uneasy about the suggestion of involving the authorities. After a long, tense silence, she spoke again. "I don't know if I can. He's dangerous. He won't stop until he finds me." Daniel took pity on her. "You're safe here for now. I'll make sure you're okay." Over the next few days, Eva settled into Daniel's apartment. She didn't ask for much, just a few essentials to keep herself going. She was polite, quiet, and grateful for his help, but there was an underlying tension between them. Daniel had to admit that while he wanted to help, he couldn't fully shake off the nagging feeling that something about her story wasn't entirely right. Still, his good nature kept him from pressing her too hard. She was vulnerable, after all, and she needed his help. Daniel went to work every day, keeping his mind busy with the case files and demands of the firm. But the thought of Eva lingered. He couldn't help but wonder why she'd been so careful with her words. There was something guarded about her, as though she was hiding more than just her bruises. It was on the fourth evening that Daniel decided to confront her, hoping to get some clarity about the situation. "Eva," he began, sitting down at the kitchen table where she had been quietly eating, "I've been thinking. If you're really running from an abusive relationship, then why don't you want to talk to the police? Why are you so reluctant to ask for help?" Eva looked up at him, her eyes filled with fear. She hesitated before responding. "I told you everything I could. I don't know what else you want from me. I can't go back to that life, Daniel. You don't understand. I understand more than you think, Daniel said gently, leaning forward. I just want to know the full truth. You don't have to protect me from anything. Eva looked down at her hands, biting her lip. She seemed torn between speaking and remaining silent. Finally, she spoke, her voice shaky. It's not just about him. It's about everything. I'm not just running from an abusive relationship. I'm running from my past, from a scandal. Eva nodded, taking a deep breath. It happened a few years ago. I was involved in something that destroyed a lot of lives. And I couldn't live with it anymore, so I left. Before Daniel could ask more, she stood up abruptly and walked away. It was clear she wasn't ready to divulge the full story. Days passed, and Eva grew more distant. She became less talkative, avoiding Daniel's attempts at conversation. Then, one afternoon, as Daniel was going through his office emails, he received a message from his younger brother, Mark, who worked in the media. Hey, Dan, the message read. Just wanted to warn you, there's a story breaking about a scandal involving Eva Carter. I know this might be a coincidence, but I thought you should know. It's all over the news. The whole thing is tied to the Carter family. Her father was involved in a massive corporate fraud scandal. It nearly ruined our family. Daniel froze as he read the message. His blood ran cold. Eva Carter. He remembered now, the name had been associated with one of the biggest scandals in corporate history, one that had rocked his own family to its core. Her father, William Carter, had been convicted of embezzling millions from his company, and the fallout had been devastating for everyone involved. His own father, a respected businessman, had lost a fortune in the process. It had been the talk of the town for months, and Eva's name had been dragged through the mud as a result. The realization hit him like a hammer. Eva wasn't just escaping a violent relationship. She was running from the wreckage of her own family's sins. And those sins had cost him and his family dearly. Daniel's mind raced. Should he confront her? Was she using him, hiding behind a fabricated story of abuse to escape the consequences of her family's actions? Or was she, too, a victim of her father's betrayal? That night, when Eva returned from a walk, Daniel confronted her in the living room. His voice was steady but laced with betrayal. Eva, I know who you are. I know about your father's scandal. You're not just running from an abusive partner, are you? You're running from your own past. Eva looked at him, her face pale. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with tears in her eyes, she whispered, I never asked for any of this. My father's mistakes aren't mine, Daniel. I'm not him. Daniel stood up, pacing the room in frustration. But you're connected to it. You were part of that family, part of that betrayal. You don't get to hide from it forever. I didn't have a choice, Eva cried, her voice breaking. I was trying to build a life away from all that, away from the shame. I thought if I kept my head down, if I stayed quiet, maybe I could outrun it. But it's everywhere. I can't escape it, Daniel. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I never wanted this. Her words hit him hard, but his anger, his feelings of betrayal, ran deeper. He had been deceived, used in a way he couldn't ignore. The following days were tense. Daniel kept to himself, his thoughts consumed by the weight of Eva's confession. He wanted to believe her, to give her the benefit of the doubt. But the truth was clear, he was a victim, too. His family had been affected by the scandal she was running from, and every moment she stayed in his apartment felt like a betrayal. Finally, after much soul-searching, Daniel made his decision. I can't help you anymore, he said one morning, his voice cold but resolute. I've done what I could, but I can't protect you from the consequences of your past. Eva nodded, tears streaming down her face. She knew it was coming, but the finality of his words cut her to the core. Eva left that afternoon, taking her suitcase and disappearing into the city. Daniel never saw her again, though he often wondered what became of her. Had she found peace, or was she doomed to live in the shadow of her family's mistakes forever? For Daniel, life went on. He repaired the rift between himself and his family, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. But the memory of Eva, and the false refuge he had offered, lingered in his mind, reminding him that sometimes, helping someone meant accepting the cost of their past, and that some ghosts could never be outrun.